The movie opens with a man sitting on a pier, and he tells us the story of how he lost his wife, Diana. Then we see a woman sitting on a bus looking at a dollar coin and then out the window as she continues the story he started. David and Diana were high school sweethearts who got married when they were young. David is an ambitious architect, while his wife Diana worked as a real estate agent. The two had their differences sometimes, but they were completely in love with each other. For example, David would leave his clothes lying around the floor and his shoes on the table, which would drive Diana crazy. But despite the small hiccups, they were always madly in love with each other. One day, a property landed in Diana's office. It was a gorgeous lot by the ocean in Santa Monica. It was perfect for David's dream house. Determined to start their future, the two took out a loan and started building. Things seemed to go their way until the recession hit. Real estate markets dried up and Diana hasn't been able to close a sale in half a year. At the same time, construction hit a low point and people were getting laid off left and right, and David was one of them. With nothing to pay, the bank looks at their assets, the house that they were building. They needed $50,000 to save their house. David swallowed his pride and borrowed $5,000 from his dad, but it's barely enough to scratch the surface. One restless night, David wakes up Diana and they travel to a casino in Las Vegas. There, David wins a few games while Diana looks around and finds a shop with a free chocolate laid out. She takes a nibble out of one before trying to shake out a handful, catching the attention of a man who sees her take the chocolate and leave. In the shop, she sees a beautiful dress and decides to check it out. The man sees her again and offers to buy her the dress. Diana refuses, saying that the dress may be for sale, but she was not. She runs back to David, who is enjoying his time winning a dice game. The man sees her kissing her husband and smiles. After the trip to the casino, they win over $25,000, halfway to their goal. The next day, the two go back to the casino and they lose the money they just made. They find a group of people hovering around a table, watching the billionaire John Gage lose over $1 million in a card game. Diana then realizes that it was this man she met the previous night, and he sees her too. He asks David if he could borrow her for a moment just for good luck, and hesitantly, Diana walks over to sit next to John. He loses again, and the two move over to play a different game, this time betting $1 million. He asks Diana to toss the dice, and she wins. Just as they're about to leave, John introduces himself to the couple and offers them to stay the night at the hotel. He orders his assistant, Mr. Shackelford, to send Diana the dress she was looking at the other night to wear to the party he was having that night. So the couple dress up and have a fun night together at John's party. While playing pool, John asks David what he wanted in life. What would satisfy him? David asks John if he was satisfied with his rich billionaire life, to which John questions if anyone is really satisfied with their lives. Diana answers that she's satisfied. To that, David says that it seems that there are limits to what money can buy. Diana tells him that he can't buy people when real emotions are involved. So John challenges this and he responds with an offer, $1 million for one night with Diana. They firmly decline and John leaves them be. Back at the hotel, the two are unable to get the offer out of their mind. Diana tells him that she doesn't want to do it, but she would take the offer for David, so he could build a house, pay his father back, and pay off their debts. The night wouldn't mean anything to them in the grand scheme of things. They just have to forget that it ever happened. The two toy around with the idea, and the next day, David calls his friend and lawyer, Jeremy, to let him know about the deal. The lawyer immediately writes up a contract covering all bases for his clients and has John sign it. Just as the date starts, David has a change of heart and starts to panic. He rushes back to John's room to call for Diana, but they weren't there anymore, and the cleaning lady tells him that they went to the roof to get a helicopter. David just narrowly misses them as the helicopter takes them to John's yacht. Diana finds a dress and a pair of high heels in the closet of the bedroom, and she puts them on. When she goes back up to the deck, John was waiting for her. After questioning why he wanted to buy her, he simply said it was because she said she couldn't be bought. Then he takes out a large coin and makes a bet. Heads they do and tails they call the whole thing off and go home. She flips the coin and it lands on heads. He leans in to kiss her and tells her that nothing's going to happen that she doesn't choose. The next day, She returns to the hotel room to find John anxiously toying with the automatic blinds. She opens the lamp and sees that he's been crying. The couple hugged each other tight, and David removes the lipstick from her mouth before they share a passionate kiss. Sometime after, they go to settle their payments for the house that they were building. Much to their dismay, they were told that the bank already took it and sold it to an undisclosed buyer. Apparently, they tried reaching them, but they were both out of town. Enraged, David and Diana leave and go home. In the kitchen, David finds a box of matches with the name Griffin on it. While helping Diana out in the garden, he asked her about it, and she reminds him that they promised that they wouldn't talk about it and forget it ever happened. He insists that since that night, he hasn't been able to get it off his mind. So she tells him that Griffin is the name of John's boat and that John took her to Santa Barbara. Diana asks him if he's been looking through her bags, but David denies this before questioning what's inside of it. Diana brushes him off and then goes back inside the house. Moments later, while David anxiously fiddles in their bedroom, he decides to look through Diana's bag. There, he finds a calling card that John has left for Diana. Later on, David finds Diana on the phone. When he asks her who she's talking to, she replies that she was talking to her mother, but she was unable to reach her. All of a sudden, he slaps the phone away from Diana and confronts her about the calling card he found. She says she hasn't seen the card before and questions why he was looking through her stuff in the first place. David tells her that he doesn't trust her anymore, and she tells him the same. In an attempt to fix things, Diana decides to buy their land back, and after looking at the real estate records for their property, she finds out that the person who bought their property was none other than John Gage himself. Enraged by this, she confronts him in a restaurant and causes a scene after she pulls the tablecloth from under the served lunch. John pulls her outside and tells her that she can't afford to buy the house back from him as it was priced at $2 million. She tells him she hated him, but he responded saying that she only wished she hated him. She furiously leaves and goes home. On the way home, she buys a bottle of wine and David asks her what she's been doing all day. Scared of how he would react, she says that she spent the entire night thinking how they were going to fix the mess that they were in, and that she went to see John that day to fix it. After hearing this, he smashes the wine bottle on the floor and screams at her to tell him what happened that night on the boat. But even as Diana tried to explain that what happened meant absolutely nothing, David was not listening to anything that she was saying. She tries to tell him not to be jealous and to stop pushing the topic, but he insists on asking if he's any good in bed. In tears, Diana hesitantly says yes. She tries to convince him that she only slept with John for David's sake, but in a jealous rage, he accuses her that she only did it for herself all along. After this terrible fight, the two spend long weeks apart. While in her office, Diana's boss excitedly tells her about a man who wanted to look at million-dollar homes. She looks at the lobby and sees that it was John. She begs her boss to find someone else, but her boss threatens to fire her if she doesn't take the job. She angrily goes with John to take a look at houses. Reluctantly, she gives John a tour of some neighborhoods. He asks why she hasn't returned any of his calls, but she ignores the question. Throughout the tour, he keeps trying to flirt with her, but she merely brushes him off repeatedly. They drive by a house that Diana estimated to be priced at $30 million minimum. John says he wanted to check it out, but Diana says that it was not for sale. John simply says that everything is for sale. When the two reach the house, she realizes that it was his all along. They take a look at the area, and John asks her what the house needed. After some thinking, she replies that it needed a bit more life, some furniture, and maybe a few dogs. But John believes that it needs her. She rejects him and says that it won't work because of the way that they started. Meanwhile, during their week apart, David moved into a small apartment. While reading the paper, he notices his shoes on the table. Remembering that Diana hated that, he cleans it up and goes back to reading. During this time, Diana takes a second job to distract herself. While teaching a citizenship class, John gets in the classroom and begins flirting with her in front of everyone. After class, he takes her to his mansion and shows her that he's got a dog as per her advice. Inside the mansion, John asks just for one dance and Diana accepts. Before she leaves, they share an intimate kiss. Meanwhile, in the small apartment, David starts looking over at Diana's photographs. He ponders on the life that they lived as a couple as he flips one picture over and reads a message written in black that says, "Have I ever told you that I loved you?" It was their unique declaration of love. He gets emotional and starts ripping all the photographs apart. A few weeks later, a drunk David confronts John and Diana. He tries to ask Diana a question. "Have I ever told you that I loved you?" Diana doesn't respond, and John just brushes him off. He tries punching John, but he misses and falls to the ground. John orders Shackleford to take him home. When they get home, Shackleford sees the ripped up photographs of Diana taped to the wall and smiles. The next day, a hungover David wakes up and sees the plan he made of the house that they were going to build with Diana. Feeling inspired again, he fixes himself up and applies for a job teaching architecture. After one of his classes, Jeremy comes up and tells him that Diana wants a divorce. If David doesn't contest the divorce, he gets everything, the land and the money. He asks Jeremy where Diana was and goes to the auction she was attending with John. At the auction for endangered animals, John is about to win a bid for a hippo, but David suddenly bids $1 million and wins the auction. Diana glares at David, making his way to the new couple, and John leaves them to talk. Rain starts pouring above them as the rest of the people leave, leaving Diana and David alone. Under the shade of their table, he tells her about the real mistake he made back in Vegas. How he thought he could forget about what happened without realizing that you can't help but remember the things you do to the people that you love. He admits that he was afraid that she wanted John, or rather, she could be right to want John instead of him. David thought that way back then because he used to think that John was the better man. Now he understands that he just had more money. After saying this, he takes up the divorce papers and signs them right in front of her. Diana tears up a little bit when seeing this. David gently caresses her face as John watched from afar. Later that night, when John and Diana are talking in the car, he tells her that she was the best of them. When she asks what he meant, he explains that Diana was the best of a thing he calls a $1 million club of women. He asks Shackleford how many members there were. Shackleford seems confused for a moment before saying that there were dozens, and gives a made-up story about a hiccuping waitress from Oklahoma. After realizing that it was all a game for John, Diana asks Shackleford to stop the car. She gives John a grateful goodbye before she leaves. He then hands her the lucky coin he flipped their first night together. As Diana runs after a bus, Shackleford asks John why he lied. John tells him that he had to end it because he knew that she would never look at him the way she looked at David. After traveling on the bus, Diana stops by the pier where David proposed to her 7 years ago. As she walks to the foggy platform, she finds a man sitting alone on a bench. It was David. She sits down behind him and asks him a question. "Have I ever told you that I loved you?" David responds, "No." She says, "I do, always." And the movie ends. Do you think love was a bigger force than money? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching till the end. We hope it was worth your time. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more entertaining movies. Stick around and enjoy our other recaps on screen. See you on the next one.